Good evening, dear dreamers. Welcome to Mystic Bedtime Stories, where ancient whispers guide you toward peaceful sleep. I'm here to take you on a journey through time tonight, to places where history meets legend, where forgotten civilizations left their gentle mark upon the earth. Tonight, we travel far from the familiar tales of Egypt's pyramids or Mesopotamia's zig. Instead, we venture into the fertile plains of ancient Ukraine, where long before Stonehenge cast its first shadow, long before the great monuments we know so well rose from desert sands, there existed a peaceful civilization that flourished in harmony with the rhythms of earth and sky. This is the story of the Trypillia people, a culture so ancient that it predates the pyramids of Giza by more than 1,000 years, between 5,000 and 2,750 years before our common era. These gentle souls created something extraordinary across the landscapes of what we now know as Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania. They built cities that housed 15,000 people, crafted pottery of breathtaking beauty, and lived according to customs that seemed to whisper of deeper wisdom about life, death, and renewal. What makes their stories so compelling, so perfectly suited for this quiet hour before sleep, is not just their antiquity, but their mystery. The Trypillians left no written records, no boastful monuments proclaiming their conquests. Instead, they left something far more intimate and intriguing. They left traces in the earth itself, patterns in clay, and the ghostly outlines of homes. They deliberately burned in ritual cycles we're only beginning to understand. As you settle deeper into comfort tonight, let yourself imagine stepping across the threshold of time. Feel the soft evening breeze that once carried the smoke of their ceremonial fires across endless grasslands. Picture yourself walking through their spiral-planned settlements as twilight approaches. When the day's work is done and the community gathers in the gentle light of hearth fires, this is not a story of kings or conquests, of battles won or empires built. This is something rarer and more precious. This is the story of a people who seem to understand something we've forgotten about, living in harmony with the natural world, about the sacred cycles of growth and letting go, about finding meaning, not in what we build to last forever, but in what we're willing to release when its time has come. Tonight, as we explore the whispers of ancient Ukraine together, you'll discover a civilization that speaks directly to that part of us that yearns for simplicity, for connection to something larger than ourselves, for the kind of peace that comes from understanding our place in the great turning of seasons and generations. So close your eyes when you feel ready, and let my voice carry you back through the centuries. Let yourself sink into the rhythm of this ancient story, where every word is chosen to guide you toward the restful sleep that awaits. At journey's end, the Trypillians understood cycles of rest and renewal better than perhaps any people who came before or after. Tonight, their wisdom becomes your lullaby. Let us begin this gentle journey together, back to a time when the world was quieter, when people lived closer to the earth, and when the boundary between the sacred and the everyday was as soft as morning mist rising from fertile fields. We're going back to the land of the Trypillians, where your dreams tonight will walk on ground blessed by 5,000 years of peaceful slumber. Rest now, dear listener, and let the ancient whispers guide you home. In those ancient days, when the world was younger and the morning mist seemed to carry voices from the very beginning of time, there stretched across Eastern Europe a land that seemed crafted by gentle hands for gentle people. Picture, if you will, the rolling plains of what we now call Ukraine, where the soil was so rich it seemed to pulse with life itself, where great rivers wound their way through landscapes painted in every shade of green the earth had ever dreamed. This was the homeland of the Trypillians, and as you drift deeper into relaxation, let yourself see it as it was 6,000 years ago. The Dnieper River catches the last golden light of evening as it flows toward distant seas. Along its banks and those of its sister rivers, the Dniester and the Southern Bug, small communities were growing into something the world had never seen before. Not cities in the way we might imagine them, with walls and fortifications, but something far more remarkable. These were settlements built on trust, communities that grew organically like flowers in a meadow, following patterns that seemed to echo the spirals found in shells and the cycles of seasons. Breathe slowly now, and let your mind's eye wander across these ancient plains. Here, where the grass grew tall enough to whisper secrets to the wind, where wildflowers painted the landscape in colors that have no names in our modern tongues, the Trypillian people found their paradise. This was a land that asked nothing of them except respect, and in return, offered everything they needed to build a civilization that would flourish for over 2,000 years. The morning air in Trypillian country carried the scent of wild herbs and the promise of rain. Imagine yourself standing on one of those gentle hills that rise like sleeping giants from the steppes, looking out over a landscape dotted with settlements that seem to grow from the earth itself. Unlike the cities of other ancient peoples, built high on rocky outcrops for defense, these communities nestled into the natural contours of the land as if they had always been there. What you would see from your hilltop vantage point would astound you with its scale and serenity. Some of these settlements stretched for miles across the fertile valleys, home to as many as 15,000 souls. To put this in perspective, dear listener, these were cities larger than medieval London, built 3,000 years before the Romans ever dreamed of their forum, yet from a distance, they seemed as natural as forests. Their earthen homes and workshops arranged in great spirals and concentric circles that followed patterns older than human memory. The Trypillians chose their locations with the wisdom of people who understood that harmony with nature was not just philosophy, but survival. They sought out places where the soil was deepest, where multiple rivers converged to provide water and transportation, where the natural amphitheaters of hills offered protection from harsh winds without requiring walls or fortifications. These were people who saw themselves as part of the landscape, not its masters. As evening approaches in your mind's journey, picture yourself walking through one of their great settlements. The pathways between the houses curve gently, following the natural drainage of the land. There are no straight lines here, no rigid geometry imposed upon the earth. Instead, everything flows like water, like the flight of birds, like the spiral patterns the Trypillians so loved to paint on their pottery. The houses themselves seem to emerge from the earth like mushrooms after rain, built of clay and timber. They rise to 2 stories in height, their rounded walls and thatched roofs, creating shapes that feel familiar and comforting even to eyes that have never seen their like before. Some are larger than others, but none proclaim dominance through size or ornamentation. This was not a society that celebrated inequality or competition. Instead, it was a community that understood that true wealth lay in the health of the whole. Walk closer now, and notice how each home is positioned with careful attention to its neighbors. There are common spaces between them, areas where children can play safely while their parents work nearby. Gardens flourish in the spaces between dwellings, not separate from the living areas, but integrated into the very fabric of daily life. Here, a patch of barley waves in the evening breeze. There, medicinal herbs send their fragrance into the settling dusk. The Trypillians were master farmers, but farming of a kind that modern agriculture has forgotten. They practiced crop rotation thousands of years before the concept was rediscovered in Europe. They understood that the earth needed rest and renewal, that fertility was not something to be extracted, but something to be partnered with through patient observation of natural cycles. Their fields stretch away from the settlements in careful patterns. Wheat and barley, the staples of life, grow in plots that are allowed to lie fallow in regular cycles. Between the grain fields, they cultivated legumes that returned nutrients to the soil, and pastures where cattle and pigs grazed, in numbers carefully balanced to the land's capacity to sustain them. But perhaps most remarkably, archaeological evidence suggests that these vast settlements, these ancient cities that housed thousands of people, existed without any sign of warfare or violent conflict. No weapons have been found in quantities that suggest military organization. No defensive walls protected their borders. No signs of destruction from enemy attacks mar their archaeological record. This was a civilization built on cooperation rather than competition, on abundance rather than scarcity, on trust rather than fear. As you settle deeper into relaxation, let this remarkable fact wash over you like a warm breeze. For over 2 millennia, these people lived in peace not just with each other, but with their neighbors and with the land itself. The rivers that flowed through Trypillian territory were highways of trade and communication. Along their banks, you might have seen boats carved from single massive trees, loaded with grain, pottery, and goods from distant settlements. The Trypillians were not isolated villagers, but participants in a network of trade and cultural exchange that stretched across hundreds of miles. Yet for all their sophistication, there was something timelessly peaceful about their way of life. The day began with the sunrise, as it had since the beginning of time. People rose to tend their animals, to work in their fields and workshops, to care for their children and elders. The rhythm of life followed the rhythm of seasons, and the rhythm of seasons followed the eternal dance of earth and sky. As twilight deepens in your imagination, picture the smoke rising from countless hearth fires, carrying with it the aromas of evening meals prepared from grains grown in familiar fields, from vegetables tended by gentle hands, from milk and cheese given freely by animals, who were treated as partners rather than mere resources. This is the land where your dreams will wander tonight, dear listener, a place where human beings found a way to live that honored both their needs and the needs of the earth that sustained them. The Trypillians are calling to you across the millennia, inviting you to remember what peace feels like, what abundance looks like when it flows from harmony rather than conquest. Rest now in the knowledge that such places existed, that human beings once knew how to build paradise, not in some distant heaven, but here on the earth we all share. The land of the Trypillians awaits your sleeping mind, ready to share its ancient secrets of contentment and its timeless lessons of living gently upon the earth. But what were these settlements really like? How did thousands of people organize themselves, without kings or armies, without the rigid hierarchies that seem to define every other ancient civilization? As your breathing grows slower and deeper, let yourself be drawn into the heart of one of these mysterious cities, to discover urban planning so sophisticated that modern architects still marvel at its ingenuity, yet so organic that it seems to have grown rather than been built. Asterisk. Close your eyes now, and imagine you are floating high above one of the great Trypillian settlements, at the peak of their civilization, perhaps 5,000 years ago. From this bird's-eye view, what you see below will take your breath away with its unexpected beauty and order. Stretching across the gentle valley floor is a pattern so intricate, so perfectly balanced, that it resembles nothing so much as a vast mandala drawn upon the earth itself. The city below you unfolds in great concentric rings, like ripples spreading outward from a stone dropped into still water. At the center lies an open space, not dominated by a palace or temple, as you might expect, but simply left clear for gatherings, for ceremonies, for the communal activities that bound this peaceful society together. Around this central plaza, the first ring of houses curves in a perfect circle, each dwelling positioned with careful attention to its relationship with its neighbors and with the rising and setting sun. But as your imaginary flight carries you in slow circles above this ancient wonder, you begin to notice that the pattern is even more complex than it first appeared. Between the concentric rings, pathways spiral inward and outward like the arms of a galaxy, creating a design that seems to pulse with life, even from this great height. Some archaeologists believe these spiral patterns were deliberate representations of cosmic forces, expressions of the Trypillians' deep understanding of the cycles that govern both human life and the movements of stars. Descend now in your mind's journey, floating gently down until you can see individual houses and workshops, gardens and courtyards. The precision of the planning becomes even more remarkable as you draw closer. Every structure has been positioned, not just for beauty, but for function. The morning sun reaches into every doorway at the perfect angle. The prevailing winds carry smoke away from living areas, while bringing fresh air through carefully planned openings. Drainage channels, invisible from ground level, carry rainwater away from foundations and toward the fields. Beyond the settlement's edge, land now at the outskirts of this ancient city, and begin to walk along one of those spiraling pathways toward the center. Your feet find a surface packed hard by countless other feet over many generations, smooth and comfortable to walk upon. The path is wide enough for people to pass each other easily, to stop and talk, to move carts loaded with goods from workshops to markets. Yet it never feels like a highway imposed upon the landscape. Instead, it flows like a stream, curving around natural obstacles. Following the gentle contours of the land as you walk, notice the houses that line your route. They are marvels of engineering that would challenge modern builders, yet they were constructed using only the materials the earth provided and the wisdom passed down through generations. The walls rise from foundations of large stones, but these stones were not quarried from distant mountains. Instead, the builders used what they found in their fields and riverbanks, fitting each piece with the patience of people who understood that haste was the enemy of both beauty and durability. Above the stone foundations, the walls are built of a mixture that shows the Trypillians' deep understanding of materials. Clay from the riverbanks has been mixed with chopped straw and other organic matter, creating a composite that is strong, yet flexible, able to expand and contract with changing seasons without cracking. The walls are thick enough to keep interiors cool in summer and warm in winter, yet their rounded corners and organic curves create spaces that feel welcoming rather than fortress-like. Stop for a moment outside one of these ancient homes and let your imagination carry you through its wooden doorway. The ground floor opens before you with surprising spaciousness. The ceiling is higher than you might expect, supported by massive wooden posts that were clearly chosen not just for their strength, but for their beauty. The wood has been smoothed to a lustrous finish that seems to glow in the soft light filtering through carefully placed openings in the walls. This lower floor was the heart of daily life. Here, grain was stored in large pottery vessels that stand like silent guardians against the walls. Work areas for food preparation occupy spaces near the door, where light is best and where the products of labor can be easily carried outside to share with neighbors. But this is not merely a utilitarian space. The walls bear decorations that speak of a people who understood that beauty was not a luxury, but a necessity for the human spirit. Painted designs spiral across the plastered surfaces in patterns that echo the layout of the city itself. Some scholars believe these house decorations were not merely ornamental, but served as maps or calendars, helping inhabitants track the passing seasons and the proper times for planting, harvesting, and the various ceremonies that marked the Trypillian year. Now climb the wooden ladder that leads to the upper floor, feeling the smooth rungs worn by countless hands over many years. The second story opens before you, like a secret chamber, more intimate than the floor below, with sloping walls that follow the curve of the thatched roof. Here was the domain of sleep and dreams, of private conversations and quiet contemplation. Windows in the upper floor are positioned to catch the first light of dawn and the last glow of sunset. From these openings, the inhabitants could look out over their city, seeing their neighbors' hearth smoke rising in the morning air, watching children play in the common spaces, observing the rhythm of a community that functioned like a single organism, each part contributing to the health of the whole. But perhaps the most remarkable feature of these ancient buildings is what they reveal about Trypillian society itself. Unlike the palaces and hovels that marked most ancient civilizations, the differences between houses in Trypillian settlements are subtle. Some are larger than others, some show evidence of specialized functions, but none proclaimed superiority or dominance. These were communities of equals, where leadership was based on wisdom and consent rather than force or birthright. The workshops scattered throughout the settlement tell the story of a highly organized economy. Here, potters shaped clay into vessels of breathtaking beauty and sophisticated function. There, weavers created textiles from flax grown in carefully tended fields. In another area, toolmakers crafted implements of stone and bone with skill that rivals modern craftsmanship. Yet for all their sophistication, these ancient cities retained an intimacy that modern urban dwellers can barely imagine. Children grew up knowing not just their immediate families, but entire extended networks of relationships that bound the community together. Elders were valued for their wisdom and cared for with reverence. Young people learned their trades not in isolation, but as apprentices to masters who understood that knowledge shared multiplied rather than diminished. As evening falls in your imagination, picture the city coming alive with the activities that marked the end of each working day. Cooking fires bloom like flowers throughout the settlement, each sending its column of smoke into the darkening sky. The aroma of baking bread mingles with the scent of roasting grain and the earthy smell of clay ovens cooling after the day's firing. People emerge from their workshops and homes to gather in the common spaces, not for grand ceremonies or royal proclamations, but for the simple pleasures of community life. Stories are shared around fires. Children play games that have been passed down through generations. Young people court under the watchful but benevolent eyes of their elders. This is the city where your dreams will wander tonight, dear listener. A place where human beings discovered how to live together in numbers that would challenge any society, yet without the conflicts and inequalities that seem inevitable in our modern world. The Trypillians built their cities not as monuments to power, but as expressions of their understanding that true civilization means creating spaces where every person can flourish. Rest now in the knowledge that such places existed, that human creativity once flowed toward harmony rather than dominance, toward beauty rather than mere efficiency. In your dreams tonight, you will walk the spiral pathways of these ancient cities, feeling the packed earth beneath your feet, breathing air perfumed by hearth fires and growing things, surrounded by the gentle murmur of a community at peace with itself and with the world. But what did the Trypillians believe? What moved their hearts and inspired their hands as they shaped the clay that has become their most enduring legacy? As you sink deeper into the peaceful rhythms of sleep, let your consciousness drift toward their workshops, where patient artisans transformed earth and water into vessels that still speak to us across the millennia, carrying messages in their swirling patterns that we are only beginning to understand. In the quiet corner of a Trypillian settlement, as the afternoon sun slants through the doorway of a potter's workshop, an artisan sits before her wheel. Her hands, stained with the rich clay of the riverbank, move with the confidence born of years of practice. Yet each vessel she creates is unique, bearing patterns that seem to flow from some deep well of inspiration within her soul. Allow yourself to settle beside this ancient craftsperson, to watch as she transforms raw earth into objects of such beauty that they take your breath away even across the vast span of centuries. The clay responds to her touch like a living thing, rising and shaping itself under her patient guidance. But this is more than mere pottery making. This is a sacred act, a conversation between human consciousness and the elemental forces that shape our world. The wheel spins slowly, hypnotically, and as it turns, the potter begins to add the decorations that will make this vessel truly with a pointed tool carved from bone, she traces spirals that seem to dance around the curved surface of the pot. These are not random decorations, not merely pretty patterns chosen to please the eye. Each spiral, each curve, each intricate meander carries meaning that runs deeper than words. Watch as her tool creates a double spiral, two curves that wind around each other in eternal dance. This symbol appears on Trypillian pottery throughout their long history, from the earliest settlements to the final ones. Scholars believe it represents the fundamental duality that governs all existence: light and dark, summer and winter, birth and death. The eternal cycling of all life between opposing yet complementary forces. Now she adds wavy lines that flow like water across the pot's surface. These undulating patterns speak of the rivers that gave life to Trypillian settlements. But they mean more than that. They represent the flow of time itself, the way life moves in currents and eddies. Sometimes rushing forward, sometimes pooling in quiet places where wisdom can grow and deepen as the decoration grows more complex. Other symbols emerge under her skillful hands. Solar discs appear, surrounded by radiating lines that speak of the sun's life-giving power. But notice how these suns are often paired with crescents, honoring both the bright father sun and the mysterious mother moon, whose cycles governed the rhythm of Trypillian life. The most remarkable symbols, however, are the ones that clearly represent the human form, particularly the female form. With just a few economical lines, the potter creates figures that pulse with life and meaning. These are not portraits of individuals, but archetypal representations of the feminine principle that the Trypillians seem to have revered above all else. Some of these female figures appear pregnant, their bellies round with new life. Others have their arms raised in gestures that might be blessing, celebration, or prayer. Still others are shown in the act of giving birth, the moment when the divine creative force manifests most powerfully in the physical world. These images suggest a society that understood the sacred nature of fertility, not just in human beings, but in all of nature. Feel the reverence in the potter's touch as she adds these figures to her vessel. This is not the work of someone creating mere household objects, but of an artist participating in a spiritual tradition that connects her to the deepest mysteries of existence. Each pot she creates will hold not just grain or water, but the accumulated wisdom of her people's understanding of the sacred. The colors she uses speak their own language. The rich red ochre that dominates Trypillian pottery comes from iron-rich earth, the same soil that nurtured their crops and supported their communities. But in the potter's hands, this humble clay is transformed into surfaces that glow like sunset, like flowing blood, like the warm heart of the earth itself, white. Slip applied over the red creates a canvas for the black painted designs. This interplay of colors, red earth, white light, black mystery, forms a visual trinity that appears again and again in Trypillian art. Some scholars suggest these colors represent the three realms of existence: the underworld of earth and ancestors, the middle world of human life, and the upper world of sky and spirits. As evening approaches and the potter's wheel finally stops turning, step closer to examine the finished vessel. What you see is more than pottery. It is a meditation in clay, a prayer made visible, a story told in curves and spirals that speaks directly to something ancient and knowing within your own soul. The patterns seem to move in the flickering light of the workshop fire, creating an almost hypnotic effect. Trace with your eyes the path of a spiral as it winds its way around the pot's circumference. Feel how it draws your consciousness inward, toward some central mystery that cannot be spoken but only experienced. This is what the Trypillians understood, that we have forgotten, that the objects we create and live with every day can be vessels not just for physical things, but for meaning, for beauty, for connection to the sacred dimensions of existence. Every meal eaten from one of these bowls was a communion with the earth that provided the food and the artisan who shaped the container. The pottery of the Trypillians reveals a worldview that saw the divine not as something distant and separate, but as intimately present in every aspect of daily life. The spirals on their pots echo the spirals in shells and galaxies, suggesting their awareness that the same patterns that govern the cosmos also govern the smallest details of human existence. Many of the vessels, bear images of what archaeologists call the great goddess, though the Trypillians themselves left no written explanation of what she meant to them. She appears sometimes as a seated figure with prominent breasts and hips, sometimes as a standing woman with arms upraised, sometimes in more abstract forms that reduce the feminine form to its essential curves and lines. But perhaps most intriguingly, she sometimes appears transformed into architectural form. Some scholars believe that the Trypillian houses themselves, with their curved walls and organic shapes, were meant to represent the body of the goddess, making every home a temple, and every family a congregation in the worship of the life-giving, feminine principle. The pottery workshops where these masterpieces were created were not separate from daily life, but integrated into the community's social fabric. Children learned by watching, absorbing through their eyes and hands the symbols and techniques that connected them to their ancestors and their beliefs. Young people developed their skills under the guidance of master potters who understood that they were passing on not just technical knowledge, but spiritual wisdom. Some of the most remarkable Trypillian vessels are the large storage jars that could hold enough grain to feed a family through a long winter. These massive pots, some standing as tall as a person, were decorated with the same care and attention as the smallest bowls. Their surfaces become fields for elaborate narrative compositions that seem to tell stories we can no longer read but can still feel. One recurring motif shows processions of female figures, their bodies stylized but unmistakably human, moving in lines around the vessel's circumference. Are these scenes of religious ceremonies, seasonal celebrations, stories of creation or renewal? We cannot know for certain, but their presence on storage jars suggests that even the most practical aspects of life were infused with spiritual significance. As you drift deeper into sleep, surrounded by the imagined presence of these ancient masterpieces, feel how the Trypillian potters speak to something eternal within you. Their symbols bypass the rational mind and communicate directly with that part of consciousness that thinks in images, dreams in metaphors, and finds meaning in the endless dance between order and chaos, creation and destruction, the temporary and the eternal. Tonight, as your own dreams begin to flow like spirals around the wheel of sleep, carry with you the wisdom encoded in Trypillian clay. Remember that beauty is not luxury, but necessity, that the sacred lives not in distant temples, but in the cups we drink from and the bowls that hold our daily bread, that every moment of creation is an opportunity to participate in the cosmic forces that shape both clay pots and human souls. But the Trypillians had another custom, even more mysterious than their pottery, that reveals perhaps the deepest aspect of their spiritual understanding. For these people who created such beautiful homes, who lived in such harmony with their communities and their land, regularly engaged in an act that seems almost incomprehensible to our modern minds. They burned their houses down. As your breathing grows even slower and your consciousness prepares to explore this profound mystery, let yourself imagine the glow of flames against the night sky and the wisdom that lay hidden in the smoke. Picture yourself standing in a Trypillian settlement on a night unlike any other. The usual peaceful sounds of evening have been replaced by something far more dramatic, yet strangely serene. Throughout the community, families are emerging from their homes carrying precious possessions, pottery vessels, tools, and treasured items passed down through generations. But this is not an evacuation born of disaster or war. This is something far more mysterious and profound. Tonight, the people of this ancient settlement will set fire to their own homes. Let your mind embrace this paradox as you settle deeper into relaxation. Here is a civilization that built with such care, that created dwellings of remarkable beauty and sophistication. Yet they deliberately destroyed these same homes in cycles that archaeologists are still trying to understand. Some settlements show evidence of burning and rebuilding every 60 to 80 years. Others seem to have burned and rebuilt even more frequently, as if the act of destruction and renewal was as natural to them as the changing of seasons. Watch now, as the evening preparations unfold, with ritual precision. The families have been planning this moment for months, perhaps years. Everything of value has been carefully removed and sorted. The pottery vessels that held their grain and water have been carried to temporary shelters outside the settlement's borders. The wooden tools, the looms, the carved figurines that decorated their homes, all have been preserved and protected. But notice what they have chosen to leave behind. The massive storage jars built into the floors, too large and too integrated into the architecture to move, remain in place. The painted murals that decorated the walls, the carefully shaped hearths where countless meals were prepared, the sleeping platforms where children were born and elders passed peacefully away. All of these intimate traces of daily life will be surrendered to the flames. As twilight deepens, the ritual begins. It starts with the eldest members of the community, those who have witnessed this ceremony before, who understand its deeper meanings. With torches made from resin-soaked wood, they approach the buildings that have sheltered their families for decades. There is no haste, no urgency. Each gesture is deliberate, reverent, like movements in a sacred dance that has been performed for countless generations. The first flames catch on the thatched roofs, sending sparks spiraling upward into the darkening sky like prayers made visible. The fire spreads slowly at first, licking at the dried grass and wooden supports with almost gentle curiosity. Then, as the flames find the timber posts and beams that form the skeleton of each dwelling, the burning accelerates, transforming individual fires into a growing conflagration that illuminates the entire settlement. But this is not destruction in any sense that we might understand it. As you watch from your imagined vantage point, you begin to sense the profound spirituality that underlies this seemingly devastating act. The people stand in reverent silence, their faces lit by the dancing flames, their expressions not of loss or grief, but of something approaching awe. What are they seeing in these flames that we cannot? What wisdom guided them to embrace destruction as an act of creation, to understand that sometimes we must let go of what we love most in order to make space for what wants to be born? Some scholars believe the burning was practical, a way to prevent the accumulation of pests and diseases that might build up in dwellings over time. Others suggest it was connected to astronomical cycles, timed to coincide with cosmic events that held deep meaning for Trypillian spirituality. Still others proposed that it was related to generational change, a way of ensuring that each age could create its own sacred spaces rather than being bound by the architectural choices of their predecessors. But perhaps the truth lies deeper than any single explanation. As the flames reach their peak, transforming solid walls and roofs into pillars of light that seem to connect earth and sky, consider that the Trypillians may have understood something about the nature of existence that our accumulation-obsessed culture has forgotten. They may have known that attachment to material things, no matter how beautiful or well-crafted, can become a prison that prevents the soul from growing and changing. The heat from the burning buildings is intense now, warming your imagined face and hands as you stand with the assembled community. The clay walls, baked hard by years of sun and weather, glow like pottery in a kiln. This comparison is not accidental. The Trypillians, master potters all, would have understood that fire does not merely destroy clay, but transforms it, making it stronger, more permanent, more beautiful. As the night progresses, and the fires burn themselves toward completion, you begin to see the deeper pattern of this ritual. The flames are consuming not just wood and clay, but something more intangible. They are burning away the accumulation of years, the weight of habit, the invisible chains that bind communities to particular ways of being and thinking. In the morning, when the ashes have cooled, the people will begin again with fresh eyes and open hearts. Watch how the children respond to this spectacular display. Rather than showing fear or distress, they seem enchanted by the dancing flames, the shower of sparks, the dramatic transformation of familiar spaces into something magical and otherworldly. This suggests that the burning ritual was not traumatic, but celebratory. A festival of renewal that children looked forward to rather than feared. The adults, meanwhile, use this time for activities that only become possible when the normal routines of daily life are suspended. Stories are shared that might otherwise be forgotten. Songs are sung that commemorate not just this particular burning, but all the burnings that came before, creating an oral tradition that links each generation to their ancestors. Wisdom. Some families take this opportunity to honor their dead, speaking the names of grandparents and great-grandparents who once lived in the homes now being consumed by flames. In this way, the burning becomes not just a destruction of buildings, but a celebration of the continuity of life, a recognition that each generation builds upon the foundations laid by those who came before, even as they create something entirely new. As the fires begin to die down, leaving glowing embers where once stood walls and roofs, the community's attention turns toward the future. Plans are made for the new settlement that will rise from these ashes. Discussions begin about which families will build where, how the spiral pathways will be laid out, what improvements might be made based on lessons learned from the settlement, now being consumed by flames. But these are not the frantic conversations of refugees displaced by disaster. These are the thoughtful deliberations of people engaged in a sacred process of renewal, who understand that destruction and creation are not opposite forces, but different aspects of a single, cosmic rhythm. The Trypillians lived this truth in ways that go far beyond their house-burning rituals. Their entire culture seems to have been organized around cycles of growth and release, accumulation and letting go, building up and breaking down. Even their pottery, so carefully crafted and beautifully decorated, was regularly broken and discarded when its usefulness was complete. Returned to the earth that had provided the clay for its creation, as the last flames flicker and fade, leaving only glowing coals and drifting smoke, the community settles into temporary shelters for the remaining hours before dawn. But this is not a night of mourning or loss. Instead, there is a quality of anticipation in the air, a sense of space having been cleared for new possibilities to emerge in your imagination. Lie down now among these ancient people, sharing their strange and beautiful vigil. Feel how the warmth of the dying fires mingles with the cool night air, creating currents that seem to carry both the substance of what has been burned and the potential of what will be built in its place. This is the wisdom the Trypillians offer to your dreams tonight, that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is let go, that sometimes the most creative act is destruction, that sometimes we must burn down the familiar structures of our lives in order to make room for growth and transformation. As sleep draws you deeper into its embrace, carry with you this image of renewal through release, of communities that understood how to die and be reborn without losing the essential thread of their identity and values. In your dreams, you may find yourself walking through the ashes of old certainties, feeling not loss but liberation, not ending but beginning. But what was life like in these remarkable communities, between the dramatic moments of building and burning? How did the Trypillians spend their days when the great ceremonies were finished and the ordinary rhythm of existence resumed? As your breathing becomes ever more peaceful and regular, let yourself drift into the gentle current of their daily life, where even the most mundane activities were touched by the same wisdom that guided their grand rituals of renewal. Dawn comes slowly to the Trypillian settlement, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold that seem to echo the colors of their beloved pottery. As the first light touches the rounded walls of their earthen homes, the community begins to stir with the unhurried rhythm of people who live in harmony with natural cycles, rather than fighting against them. Let yourself become part of this ancient morning, feeling the cool air that carries the scent of dew-dampened earth, and the faint smoke from hearth fires being rekindled after the night's rest. There is no jarring sound of alarms here, no sudden rush into frantic activity. Instead, the day begins with the gentle sounds of a community awakening, children's soft voices, the lowing of cattle in nearby pastures, the quiet conversation of women as they begin the day's first tasks. Step into one of these homes as the family rises with the sun. The interior is lit by the soft glow filtering through carefully placed openings in the walls, creating patterns of light and shadow that seem to dance across the decorated surfaces. The family moves with the calm efficiency of people whose lives are organized around cooperation rather than competition, where each person knows their role and performs it not from obligation, but from understanding of how their contributions serve the well-being of the whole. The woman of the house, perhaps 30 years old, but carrying herself with the quiet authority that Trypillian society seems to have granted to its women, begins her day by checking the grains stored in the large pottery vessels that line the walls. Her movements are deliberate, reverent even, as she measures out what will be needed for the day's bread. This is not merely a practical task, but a sacred one. A daily communion with the earth that provided the grain and the generations of ancestors who developed the knowledge of how to transform it into sustenance. Watch as she grinds the grain on a stone quern that has been shaped and smoothed by countless hands before hers. The rhythm of her work creates a sound that seems to echo through the settlement, joining with similar sounds from other homes to create a morning symphony of productivity and purpose. But notice how she takes her time, how the motion of grinding becomes almost meditative, a way of centering herself for the day ahead. Her children, rather than being hurried off to separate activities, remain close, learning through observation, and gradually taking on age-appropriate tasks. A daughter of perhaps 10 years tends the fire, adding carefully chosen pieces of wood to maintain the steady heat needed for cooking. A younger son helps sort seeds that will be planted in the family garden, his small fingers learning to distinguish between different varieties while his mother tells him stories about their properties and uses. This is education, as the understood it, not separate from life, but integrated into every moment of daily existence. Children learned not from books or formal lessons, but from participating in the rhythms of community life, absorbing knowledge through their senses and their relationships with the adults who guided them with patience and wisdom. The father of the family, meanwhile, prepares for his day's work in the fields. But first, he joins his family for the morning meal, a simple affair of bread, cheese, and perhaps some preserved fruit from the previous harvest. The food is served in pottery bowls decorated with the same spiral patterns that appear throughout Trypillian art, making even this ordinary meal a reminder of the sacred patterns that govern existence. As they eat, the family talks quietly about the day ahead. There is no sense of hurry or anxiety, no frantic planning or worried discussion of problems. Instead, their conversation flows like water, touching on practical matters, but always returning to the deeper currents of relationship and meaning that seem to have guided every aspect of Trypillian life. After the meal, the family members separate to their various activities, but they do not scatter to distant locations as might happen in our modern world. The father walks only a short distance to fields that surround the settlement like green embraces. The mother moves to her workshop area, where she will spend part of the day creating pottery or weaving textiles. The children remain within the community, playing and learning under the watchful but relaxed supervision of many adults who understand that raising children is a community responsibility, not a private burden. Follow the father now as he walks to the fields, his feet finding paths worn smooth by generations of farmers before him. The land he tends has been carefully organized according to principles that modern agriculture is only beginning to rediscover. Different crops are planted in rotation, each chosen not just for its nutritional value, but for its effect on soil health and its compatibility with the plants that will follow in subsequent seasons. In one field, wheat grows tall and golden, ready for harvest. In another, legumes are growing, their roots working in partnership with soil bacteria to capture nitrogen from the air and transform it into nutrients that will feed next year's grain crops. Still other areas lie fallow, resting and recovering their fertility, while wild plants and grazing animals maintain the complex web of relationships that keeps the soil healthy and productive. The farmer works with tools that are simple but perfectly adapted to their purposes. His wooden plow, drawn by oxen who seem as calm and unhurried as their human companions, turns the soil with a gentleness that preserves its structure and fertility. His harvest tools are crafted from stone and bone, shaped by hands that understood materials intimately and created objects that would last for generations. But perhaps most remarkably, as he works, he is never alone. Other farmers move through nearby fields, and throughout the day, they pause to talk, to share observations about weather and soil conditions, to offer help when needed. This is agriculture as community activity, not solitary struggle. Knowledge is shared freely, problems are solved collectively, and success is measured not by individual accumulation, but by the health and abundance of the whole community. Meanwhile, back in the settlement, the women gather in informal groups for the day's crafts. In one area, potters work together at their wheels, their hands shaping clay, while their voices weave stories and songs that have been passed down through countless generations. The pottery they create is both functional and beautiful, each vessel a testament to their understanding that utility and aesthetics are not opposites, but partners in the creation of a truly human environment. In another area, weavers work at looms that transform flax grown in carefully tended plots into textiles of remarkable quality and beauty. The patterns they weave echo the designs found on pottery and painted walls, creating a visual consistency that makes the entire settlement feel like a single work of art. Crafted by many hands, but guided by a shared aesthetic vision, children move freely between these work areas, sometimes helping with simple tasks, sometimes simply watching and absorbing the skills and knowledge that will one day be theirs. There is no separation between work and play, between learning and living. Instead, all activities flow together in a seamless tapestry of community life. The day progresses with the same unhurried rhythm with which it began. Around midday, families gather again for a simple meal, often eaten outdoors in the pleasant spaces between homes. These shared meals are times for strengthening social bonds, for discussing community matters, for celebrating small successes and offering support for minor challenges. Notice how conflicts, when they arise, are handled, not through domination or punishment, but through patient discussion and community mediation. The Trypillians seem to have understood that lasting peace comes not from the suppression of disagreement, but from the patient work of finding solutions that honor everyone's needs and concerns. As afternoon approaches, activities shift gradually toward the evening rhythms. The farmers return from the fields, bringing with them the day's harvest or reports of crops' progress. The craftspeople begin to clean their tools and organize their workspaces. Children gather the day's eggs from chickens who roam freely through the settlement, pecking at seeds and insects while contributing their own gifts to the community's abundance. The evening meal is a more elaborate affair than the simple breakfast and lunch that came before. Families gather around hearth fires as the sun begins to set, sharing food prepared from ingredients they have grown, raised, or gathered themselves. The pottery vessels that hold their food glow in the firelight, their painted decorations seeming to come alive in the dancing shadows. After the meal, as darkness settles gently over the settlement, the community enters the most magical part of its daily cycle. This is the time for stories, for songs, for the sharing of wisdom and wonder that transforms ordinary people into keepers of eternal truths. Families gather around fires, and gradually these separate groups merge into larger circles that encompass more and more of the community. Children nestle against adults who may or may not be their biological parents, for the Trypillians seem to have understood that all children belong to the whole community. Elders speak of times long past, their words carrying the accumulated wisdom of lifetimes spent in harmony with natural rhythms and human relationships. The stories they tell are not mere entertainment, but teaching tools that carry within them the values and insights that have allowed their culture to flourish for so many centuries. Tales of cooperation triumph over stories of conquest. Narratives of harmony with nature take precedence over legends of domination. Characters who embody wisdom and patience are celebrated more than those who display strength or cunning. As the evening deepens and the fires burn lower, the community gradually disperses to their homes. But there is no sense of isolation or loneliness as families separate for the night. Instead, there is a feeling of completion, of a day well lived, in service of values that connect each individual to something larger and more enduring than their personal desires. Sleep comes easily in Trypillian homes, for these are people whose days are spent in activities that nourish both body and soul. Their beds are simple but comfortable, their dreams undisturbed by the anxieties that plague communities built on competition and accumulation rather than cooperation and sustainability. This is the daily rhythm that sustained the Trypillian civilization for over 2,000 years. Dear listener, this is the gentle way of life that your dreams will explore tonight. A world where work was meaningful, where relationships were valued above possessions, where the pace of life allowed for both productivity and contemplation, where every day was an opportunity to participate in the great dance of existence with grace and gratitude. Rest now in the knowledge that such communities once flourished, that human beings once knew how to live in ways that honored both individual needs and collective well-being. Tonight, as you sleep, you walk in their footsteps on paths worn smooth by countless generations of feet, breathing air perfumed by their hearth fires, feeling the deep peace that comes from living in harmony with the rhythms of earth and sky. But time moves on, as it always does, and the gentle voices of the Trypillians have long since fallen silent. What remains of their world now exists only in the patient earth, which holds their secrets like a loving mother holds the memories of her children. As your breathing grows slower and your consciousness begins to drift toward the deep rest that awaits, let yourself descend through layers of soil and centuries to discover what traces remain of this peaceful civilization and how those traces still speak to us across the vast expanse of time. And so the seasons turned, one into another, as they had for centuries in the gentle settlements of Trypillia. The children grew to become adults, the adults aged into wisdom, and the wise ones eventually returned to the earth that had cradled them so tenderly. But the earth, dear traveler, the earth remembers everything. Close your eyes now, and let us journey beneath the surface of those ancient Ukrainian fields. Feel yourself sinking slowly, gently, through layers of time itself. The modern world fades above you like morning mist, and here, in this quiet darkness, the whispers of the past grow clearer. Your fingers touch something smooth and curved, a piece of pottery painted with spirals that once caught the light of Trypillian fires. The clay is cool under your touch, but it carries within it the warmth of hands that shaped it 5,000 years ago. Those hands belonged to artists who created ceramic statues of female figures and animals, leaving behind a legacy in clay that speaks of their deepest beliefs. Run your thumb along its surface, and you can almost feel the rhythm of the potter's wheel spinning. These may have been the oldest pottery wheels ever discovered, spinning centuries before similar tools appeared in Mesopotamia. The spiral patterns beneath your fingers tell stories that have no words, speaking in the language of curves and symbols that the earth has preserved like treasures in a gentle vault. Move deeper now, through the soft soil that holds secrets like a mother holds memories. Here, your hand encounters something larger, smoother. It is the remnant of a floor, baked hard by the fires that once warmed a Trypillian home. This is what they call the plastica, the burned foundation that remains when everything else has crumbled to dust. Archaeological evidence shows these burnt house remains and pottery kilns scattered across ancient settlement sites. Place your palm flat against this ancient floor and listen. Can you hear it? The soft footsteps of children running across this surface, the gentle scrape of pottery being set down for the evening meal, the quiet conversations of families gathering around their hearth as darkness fell over the village. This floor held their laughter, their tears, their daily rituals of living, and when they chose to burn their home in that mysterious ceremony we spoke of before, this floor remained, baked harder by the flames, preserving the memory of all who had walked upon it. The earth remembers their footprints, though the feet that made them have long since returned to dust. It remembers the weight of their bodies, the pattern of their walking, the places where they knelt to pray, or work, or play. Every step they took, pressed gently into the soil, and the soil, patient and faithful, kept the impression of their passing. Shift slightly in this archaeological dream, and let your fingers discover other treasures. Here, a fragment of bone, worked smooth by loving hands into a tool or ornament. Archaeologists have found fragments of pottery, earthenware vessels, and objects made of bone and flint, including ancient cups, bowls, and jugs. The bone speaks of animals that grazed in their fields, that gave their lives to sustain the community, that became part of the endless cycle of earth, and growth, and return. And here, so small, you almost miss it, a bead of clay no larger than a pea, but oh, what stories it could tell. Perhaps it once adorned the neck of a Trypillian woman as she walked to the fields in the early morning. Perhaps a child played with it, rolling it between small palms, while learning the shapes that would one day become pottery. Perhaps it fell from a larger vessel, a small piece breaking away to begin its own journey through time. The earth remembers their fires, too. Not just the great burning of houses, but the smaller flames that warmed their days. Remnants of two-tier pottery kilns, including multi-channel ones, have been found at settlement sites, showing the sophistication of their ceramic craft. Traces of charcoal lie scattered through the soil like stars across a dark sky, each piece a memory of warmth, of light, pushing back the darkness, of communities gathering in the flickering glow to share stories and dreams. Feel the texture of this ancient earth between your fingers. It is different from modern soil, richer somehow, deeper in its silence. It has been mixed with the dust of countless generations, each life adding its own essence to the whole. The ash from their fires, the fragments of their pottery, the very breath they exhaled in their lifetime, has all become part of this sacred ground. But perhaps the most precious thing the earth remembers is their gentleness. Despite the vast number of artifacts the Trypillia left behind, archaeologists have found very few human remains. This absence itself tells a story of a people who treated even death with such reverence that they left barely a trace. They returned to the earth so completely, so peacefully, that they seem to have dissolved into the very landscape they loved. The earth remembers their absence of violence, too. In soil layers that should contain weapons, if this had been a warlike people, archaeologists find instead only tools of creation, pottery shards, weaving weights, grinding stones, and ornaments. The earth holds no memory of battlefields or fortifications, only of gardens and workshops, of children playing and adults creating beauty with their hands. Listen now to what the earth whispers in its deep, slow voice. It speaks of mornings when the dew collected in the spiral patterns of their pottery, left outside to catch the night's moisture. It remembers the vibration of their footsteps during festivals, when entire villages would dance in great circles, their feet drumming rhythms into the ground that echoed for days afterward. The earth recalls the sensation of their offerings, too. Small gifts pressed into the soil, with prayers for good harvests, for healthy children, for peace in their communities. These offerings dissolved long ago, but their intention remains, woven into the very fabric of the ground, like golden threads in a dark tapestry. Sometimes, when the conditions are just right, when the soil is disturbed by careful archaeological hands, these memories rise to the surface like bubbles in still water. A perfectly preserved pot emerges, its painted spirals as bright as the day they were created. A small figurine appears, worn smooth by ancient fingers, but still recognizable as the goddess figures the Trypillians cherished. Each discovery is like a word in a vast, slow sentence that the earth has been speaking for thousands of years. The sentence tells of a people who lived so gently upon the land that they barely left a mark, yet lived so richly that their essence soaked deep into every grain of soil. As you rest here, in this archaeological dream, surrounded by the patient memory of the earth, you begin to understand something profound. The Trypillians did not simply disappear without a trace. They became the trace. They dissolved so completely into the landscape they loved that they became part of its very being. Their atoms mingled with the atoms of soil and stone. Their breath became part of the wind that still blows across those Ukrainian fields. The earth remembers their lullabies, sung in voices we will never hear, in a language we will never understand. But the melodies remain, hummed by the wind through grass, by water flowing over stones, by the gentle rustle of leaves in trees that grew from soil, enriched by their presence. And so, as we prepare to journey deeper into their world, know that we walk on sacred ground. Every step across those ancient fields is a step across the memory of a people who understood something we are only beginning to learn, that we do not own the earth. We belong to it. And when our time comes to return, the earth will remember us too, with the same patient love it has shown to every generation that has walked upon its surface. The fragments they left behind are not just artifacts to be catalogued and displayed. They are love letters, written in clay and bone and charcoal, left for us to find thousands of years later. Messages that say, we were here, we loved this place, we lived gently upon it, and we trusted it to remember us when we were gone. And, in the quiet darkness of this archaeological reverie, as your fingers trace the patterns left by ancient hands, you begin to sense something else stirring in the earth's memory. Something deeper than pottery and floors and tools. The echo of their spiritual life, their connection to forces greater than themselves. 2 cycles of moon and season, and the eternal rhythm of the divine feminine that guided their days. Let us follow these whispers now, as they lead us toward understanding the sacred heart of Trypillian life. And as your fingers release their hold on those ancient pottery fragments, as you rise slowly from the archaeological depths of memory, something else calls to you through the darkness. It is a silver light, soft and welcoming, that seems to emanate not from above, but from within the very earth itself. This is the light that guided the Trypillians through their daily lives, the gentle radiance of the divine feminine that touched every aspect of their existence. Look up now, through the veil of centuries, and see the moon as the Trypillians saw her. She is not merely a distant orb of rock and crater, but a living presence, a mother watching over her children, a goddess whose phases marked the rhythm of all life. The Trypillians understood what we have forgotten, that the moon's gentle pull moves not only the tides of the ocean, but the tides of the human heart, in their settlements. As darkness fell, and the cooking fires dimmed to glowing embers, families would gather in their courtyards and look up at this celestial mother. They saw in her changing face the eternal cycle of birth, growth, fullness, and rest that governed all existence. The new moon, like a pregnant belly in the darkness, promising new life. The waxing moon, like a young woman coming into her power. The full moon, radiant and complete, like a mother in the fullness of her love. And the waning moon, wise and gentle, like a grandmother, sharing the deep knowledge of years. Feel yourself settling into the soft grass of a Trypillian courtyard on such a night. The air is warm and still, scented with the herbs that grow in careful gardens around each dwelling. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the gentle lowing of cattle returning from pasture, and the soft murmur of voices as families call their children home. But here, in this sacred space, a different kind of gathering is beginning. A woman approaches, and in her hands she carries something precious. It is a ceramic figurine, small enough to rest in her palm, but radiating a presence that seems to fill the entire courtyard. The figurine depicts a female form, full-breasted and wide-hipped, her arms raised in a gesture of blessing or celebration. Archaeological evidence reveals thousands of such female figurines throughout Trypillian sites, with triangular symbols below the belly representing fertility, suggesting their central role in ritual and spiritual life. This is no mere artwork, but a sacred vessel, a way of holding and honoring the divine feminine energy that the Trypillians believed flowed through all of creation. As the woman places the figurine on a small altar of stones, you can see that it has been worn smooth by countless hands, darkened by the oils of skin and the smoke of many fires. This goddess figure has been loved, truly loved, by generations of worshippers. Other women begin to arrive, and children too, drawn by some invisible summons that speaks to the deepest parts of their beings. They form a circle around the altar, and as they do, you notice how their movements mirror the very pottery patterns that archaeologists would later find buried in the earth. The stylized feminine silhouettes facing inward in an interlinked circle represented a hora, or ritualistic dance, found at multiple Cucutini sites. Spirals within spirals, circles within circles, the eternal dance of the feminine divine. As the moon climbs higher in the star-filled sky, the ritual begins. But this is not ceremony as we might imagine it, with formal words and rigid procedures. Instead, it flows like water, like breath, like the natural rhythms of the body itself. One woman begins to hum, a melody that seems to rise from the earth and return to the sky. Others join in, their voices weaving together like threads in an invisible tapestry. The children sway gently, held in their mother's arms, or dancing free on bare feet that know instinctively how to move in harmony with the ancient rhythms. There is no separation here between sacred and everyday, between worship and life. The goddess they honor is not distant and terrible, demanding sacrifice and submission, but present and nurturing, as close as their own breath, as intimate as the beating of their hearts. Watch as one of the women lifts a bowl of fresh milk toward the moon, offering the first fruits of their gentle labor to the celestial mother who watches over them. The milk catches the moonlight and seems to glow from within, as if the lunar essence has descended to bless their simple gift. This offering will not be burned or destroyed, but poured into the earth, nourishing the soil that nourishes them in return. Another brings grain, golden kernels that shimmer like tiny stars in the palm of her hand. Each kernel represents the miracle of life emerging from apparent death, the seed that sleeps in winter darkness, only to wake in spring light. As she scatters the grain around the altar, you can almost see the great cycle it represents: earth to plant, plant to grain, grain to earth again. Endlessly, timelessly, lovingly, the sacredness of the moon has been connected with the basic rhythms of life in the universe, appearing across various eras and cultures. But here among the Trypillians, this connection feels especially profound. They have structured their entire society around these rhythms, timing their planting and harvesting, their ceremonies and celebrations, their very heartbeats to the gentle pulse of their celestial mother. Feel the energy that flows through this, gathering soft as silk, but strong as the roots of ancient trees. It is the energy of creation itself, the force that brings new life into being and sustains it through all its changes. The Trypillians understood that this energy was not something to be conquered or controlled, but something to be honored and worked with, like a beloved partner in the great dance of existence. As the ritual continues, you begin to understand why so many goddess figurines have been found in Trypillian sites, why they appear in homes and workshops, in storage areas and courtyards, These were not objects of worship in the sense we might understand, but reminders, companions, focal points for a spirituality that permeated every moment of daily life. The goddess was not separate from ordinary existence, but woven into its very fabric. The women began to dance now, their movements flowing and circular, following patterns that seemed to echo the spiral decorations on their pottery, the circular layouts of their villages, the great wheel of the seasons themselves. Some hold clay rattles that whisper like rain on leaves, others carry small drums that beat in rhythm with the human heart. The children join in when they feel called to, stepping back when they need rest, free to participate in their own time and their own way. And through it all, the moon watches. She is the great witness, the eternal mother, who has observed countless such gatherings, who will observe countless more. In her light, the faces of the dancers become luminous, transformed by the joy of connection, by the deep peace that comes from knowing their place in the great web of existence. You find yourself swaying with them, though you are separated by thousands of years. The rhythm they dance to is the same rhythm that moves in your own blood, the same cycle that governs your own body's changes, the same lunar pull that stirs something deep and wordless in your dreams. For a moment, the veil of time becomes thin, and you are not observer, but participant, not stranger but family. As the moon reaches her highest point in the sky, the formal aspects of the ritual begin to fade, but the sense of connection, of sacred presence, remains. Mothers nursing babies continue to sway gently, children curl up in warm laps, elders share quiet words of wisdom and memory. The goddess figurine continues to stand watch over them all, her clay form solid and reassuring in the flickering light. Gradually, naturally, the gathering begins to disperse. Families drift back to their homes, children carried sleeping on strong shoulders. The goddess figurine carefully returned to its place of honor. But the energy they have raised together lingers in the air, like perfume, like music just beyond the range of hearing. And you, dear dreamer, remain in that sacred courtyard, as the moon begins her slow journey toward the western horizon. In her gentle light, you can see the true secret of Trypillian spirituality. It was not about worshipping distant gods who demanded fear and submission, but about recognizing the divine presence that flowed through all things, especially through the life-giving power of the feminine. The goddess they honored was not separate from nature, but was nature itself, in all its forms. She was the earth that grew their grain, the water that filled their wells, the air that filled their lungs. She was the power that brought children into the world, and the gentle strength that carried them through life's changes. She was the moon that lit their nights and the sun that warmed their days, the endless creative force that danced through all existence. As you lie back in that ancient grass, feeling the earth's gentle support beneath you, you begin to understand why the Trypillians lived so peacefully, why they created such beauty, why they disappeared so quietly when their time was done. They knew something that we are still learning, that we are not separate from the divine, but part of it. Not rulers of nature, but participants in its great dance. The moon continues her ancient journey across the star-filled sky, and as her light bathes your face, you feel a deep sense of coming home. This is the home that exists beyond time and place, the spiritual home that the Trypillians found in their devotion to the Great Mother who encompasses all things. In her light, you are never alone, never lost, never forgotten, and as sleep begins to claim you there in that sacred space, you carry with you the blessing of the moon goddess, the same blessing that sustained the Trypillians through their long and peaceful existence. It is the blessing of connection, of belonging, of knowing your place in the great web of life that connects all beings across all time. But even the most beautiful of earthly things must eventually change, must eventually pass away, as you drift deeper into sleep beneath the watchful gaze of the eternal moon. You sense something shifting in the dreams of the Trypillian people, a restlessness, a stirring, a sense that their long season of peace and plenty is drawing toward its close. The goddess mother still watches over them, but even she cannot prevent the great changes that time brings to all her children. But even as the moon goddess smiled down upon her beloved children, even as the rituals continued and the pottery wheels turned, and the gentle life of the Trypillians flowed on like a peaceful river, something was beginning to change. It started so slowly, so subtly, that perhaps only the oldest grandmothers, those who had lived long enough to remember the deeper patterns of earth and sky, sensed it first. Feel yourself standing now in one of those great settlements, sometime around 3200, before our common era. The sun rises, as it always has, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. The birds sing their ancient songs, children laugh as they play, and smoke rises from morning cooking fires. Yet if you stand very still, if you listen with more than your ears, you can sense something different in the air. The grandmother who grinds grain in the courtyard beside you pauses in her work. Her weathered hands rest on the smooth stone, and she looks up at the sky with eyes that have seen many seasons come and go. There is something in that sky, something in the quality of light itself, that speaks to her bones of change approaching. The earth had been going through what we now know as the Holocene climatic optimum, a time when the world was warmer and wetter than it had been since the end of the last ice age. But that golden age was drawing to its close. Listen to the wind as it moves through the settlement. In its voice, you can hear the whisper of transformation. The climate that had nurtured the Trypillians for thousands of years was beginning to shift imperceptibly at first, then with gathering force, around 3200 BC. The Earth's climate became colder and drier than it had been since the end of the last ice age, bringing with it what would become the worst drought in European history since the beginning of agriculture. But the Trypillians, these gentle people of the earth, could not have understood what was coming in terms of global climate patterns and atmospheric changes. They experienced it as their grandparents might have warned them. All changes come gradually, then suddenly, like the turning of seasons, but deeper, more permanent, more profound. The first sign was perhaps in the grain fields. The woman who had always known exactly when to plant, whose hands could feel the readiness of soil like a mother feels the stirring of life within her womb, found herself uncertain. The rains that had always come at the right time began to falter, not dramatically at first, not enough to cause alarm, but enough that the older farmers began to murmur among themselves, sharing memories of their grandparents' stories about harder times. Walk with me now, through those fields, as the seasons turn, where once the grain grew tall and golden, reaching toward a generous sun. Now, the stalks grow shorter, the heads of wheat smaller. The earth that had always yielded abundantly to gentle cultivation begins to crack under skies that remain blue and cloudless for longer than anyone can remember. The culture that relied primarily on farming to sustain their large populations found their very foundation shifting beneath their feet. But this was not a sudden catastrophe, not a disaster that struck like lightning and left nothing in its wake. The Trypillians faced their great transformation as they had lived their lives, gently, thoughtfully, with a deep trust in the natural rhythms of existence. They did not know they were living through what scholars would later call the end of an era, the close of one of humanity's first experiments in large-scale, peaceful civilization in the settlements. You can see the adaptation beginning. Families that had lived for generations in the same houses, following the same patterns, begin to make small changes. Some move closer to the rivers, seeking the moisture that still flows even as the rains diminish. Others begin to plant different crops, varieties that can survive with less water, that can thrive in the changing conditions. The great circular villages, those marvels of prehistoric urban planning that had housed thousands of people, gradually grow smaller, not through warfare or disease, not through any violent disruption, but through the natural dispersal of people following the resources they need to survive. It is like watching a great, gentle organism slowly reshape itself in response to environmental pressure. Some families drift southward, toward regions where the climate remains more favorable. Others move into the forest zones, where the trees provide shelter from the increasing aridity. The late period of Trypillia culture, dating from 3200 to 2700 BC, shows this peaceful fragmentation into smaller local groups, each adapting to different natural conditions as they scattered from forest to steppe zones. And perhaps, in their great wisdom, some chose a different path entirely. The ritual burning of houses, that mysterious custom that had puzzled later archaeologists, takes on a different meaning now. Perhaps it was not just a ceremony of renewal, but a ceremony of release. Perhaps they understood, in their deep connection to the natural world, that sometimes the most loving thing to do is to let go, to return to the earth what the earth has given, to dissolve back into the great flow of existence from which they had never truly been separate. Imagine standing in one of their settlements on such a night, when a family has chosen to perform this ultimate ritual. The moon, the eternal mother, watches as they remove everything precious from their home. The pottery with its spiral patterns, the goddess figurines worn smooth by loving hands, the tools and treasures accumulated over generations. These are carefully distributed among neighbors and relatives, each object finding a new home where it will continue to be cherished. Then comes the lighting of the fire. But this is not destruction, not in the way we might understand it. This is transformation, return, release. The flames that consume the house carry its essence up toward the stars, returning the spirit of the dwelling to the cosmic dance from which it came. The family that watches does not mourn but celebrates, knowing they have given their most precious possession back to the universe that gave it life. Some families made this choice and then wandered away, becoming part of other cultures, other ways of life. Their children and grandchildren carried Trypillian blood and wisdom into new communities, where it blended and merged like streams flowing into a great river. In this way, the Trypillians did not die out, but became part of the larger human story, their gentleness and their knowledge woven into the fabric of all who came after. Others may have retreated, so deeply into harmony with the natural world that they became like the wind and the rain themselves, so perfectly integrated with the landscape that they left no trace for future archaeologists to find. These may have been the ones who achieved the ultimate goal of their spiritual practice, dissolving the boundary between self and nature so completely that they became one with the earth. They had always served, but perhaps the most beautiful possibility is that they simply chose to fade away as gently as they had lived, like morning mist dissolving in the warmth of the rising sun. They had given the world a gift, a demonstration that human beings could live peacefully, could create beauty without violence, could build great communities without exploitation or war. Having offered this gift, having planted these seeds in the garden of human consciousness, perhaps they felt their work was done. The great drought that began around 3200 BC was indeed severe, creating what became known as the arid subboreal phase, the longest and most devastating drought Europe had experienced since the end of the last ice age. But the Trypillians' response to this crisis reveals everything about who they were as a people. They did not fight the change, did not try to force the earth to continue giving what it could no longer provide. Instead, they adapted, they migrated, they transformed, they let go, and in letting go, they achieved a kind of immortality. For although their great settlements crumbled back into the earth, although their pottery broke into the fragments that archaeologists would later piece together like puzzles, the essence of what they were, the spirit of their approach to life, could never be destroyed. You can feel it now, as you stand in that ancient landscape under the eternal stars. The Trypillians are not gone, not really. They live on in every gentle touch, every act of creation, every moment when human beings choose cooperation over conflict, beauty over utility, harmony over dominance. They live on in the spirals that still appear in art and architecture, in the reverence for the feminine divine that still stirs in human hearts, in the dream of peaceful communities that still inspires us today. Their disappearance was not a tragedy but a transformation, not an ending but a return, like the grain they planted that died in the earth, only to rise again as new life, like the houses they burned to make space for new growth. Like the moon that wanes only to be reborn, the Trypillians passed from visible existence into something larger, more enduring, more beautiful, and as you feel yourself sinking deeper into sleep, deeper into the dreaming consciousness that connects all times and all places, you begin to understand that they never really left us at all. They are there in the quietest moments, in the spaces between breaths, in the pause between heartbeats. They are there in every act of kindness, every creation of beauty, every choice to live gently upon the earth. The earth holds their memories still, not just in the artifacts buried in its depths, but in its very essence, in the way the wind moves through grass, in the patterns water makes when it flows over stone. And sometimes, when conditions are just right, when the modern world grows quiet enough to listen, their whispers rise to the surface once again, calling to us across the centuries, reminding us of possibilities we had almost forgotten, and so they passed from visible existence into memory, into legend, into the quiet dreams of the earth itself. For thousands of years, the fields of Ukraine grew their crops and sheltered their people, while beneath their feet, sleeping in the patient darkness, lay the remnants of a civilization the modern world had forgotten. The whispers were always there, waiting for someone with the right ears to hear them, someone with the right eyes to see past the surface of things to the deeper truths hidden below. Feel yourself now in the late afternoon of a spring day in 1897, walking beside a man whose name would become forever linked with the rediscovery of the ancient world. His name is Vikenty Kavoika, and he moves through the countryside near the village of Trypillia, south of Kyiv, with the careful attention of someone who has learned to read the subtle language of the landscape. Near Trypillia, archaeologist Vikenty Kavoika discovered an extensive Neolithic site. Reporting his findings in 1897 to the 11th Congress of Archaeologists, Kavoika's hands are gentle as they brush soil from a fragment of pottery that has caught his eye, but his heart beats faster with recognition. The spiral patterns that emerge from beneath centuries of earth are unlike anything he has seen before, yet somehow familiar, as if they speak to something deep in human memory that transcends time and culture. This Czech-born Ukrainian archaeologist could not have known that he was about to introduce the world to one of Europe's most remarkable and peaceful civilizations. Watch him as he kneels in the soft earth, his experienced fingers working carefully around the edges of what will prove to be one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 19th century. Each fragment he uncovers whispers stories of people who lived and loved and created beauty in this very place more than 5,000 years ago. The afternoon sun slants through the trees as he works, and you can almost feel the presence of those ancient Trypillians gathering around him, grateful that their long silence is finally being broken. The pottery shards that emerge from the earth are breathtaking in their artistry and sophistication. Red and orange clay, painted with intricate patterns of spirals, waves, and geometric designs that speak of a culture with both technical skill and profound aesthetic sensibility. As Kavoika carefully places each fragment in his collecting bag, he cannot know that he holds in his hands evidence of some of humanity's earliest experiments with urban living, with peaceful coexistence, with the creation of beauty for its own sake. But the whispers beneath his feet are just beginning to speak. Word of Kavoika's discoveries spreads through the archaeological community like ripples across still water. Around the same time, in Romania, ethnography Teodor Barada had also discovered ceramic pottery fragments scattered among stones in the village of Cucutini, leading to the first official excavations there. It becomes clear that what they have found is not isolated to a single site, but evidence of a vast culture that once stretched across the fertile lands of Ukraine, Moldova, and Romania. As the years pass and more sites are discovered, the true scope of Trypillian civilization begins to emerge. Each excavation reveals new wonders, new evidence of the sophisticated society that once flourished in these peaceful river valleys. As of modern times, more than 2,440 Cucatina Trypillia settlements have been discovered across Moldova, Ukraine, and Romania, with 194 settlements covering more than 10 hectares and 29 settlements ranging from 100 to 450 hectares, with up to 2,800 houses. Feel yourself standing now in a modern archaeological site, perhaps at Talianki or Mednecki, notable sites that have contributed valuable pieces to understanding this distinctive culture that flourished during the Neolithic and Chalcolithic periods. The morning mist rises from the earth as teams of careful scientists work with brushes and trowels, revealing layer by layer the remains of Europe's earliest cities. Here, in the patient methodology of modern archaeology, the whispers of the Trypillia grow clearer. Ground-penetrating radar reveals the ghostly outlines of houses arranged in those mysterious concentric circles. Careful stratigraphic analysis shows how the settlements grew and changed over time. After many years of excavations at Mednecki and Talianki, archaeologists discovered that the large settlements were created and developed step by step, with stratigraphy, settlement planning, and pottery styles revealing their gradual development. But it is not just the scale of their settlements that amazes modern researchers. It is the absence of what we might expect to find. No fortifications, no weapons caches, no evidence of warfare or violence. Instead, the earth yields pottery of extraordinary beauty, goddess figurines worn smooth by loving hands, tools designed for creation rather than destruction. Currently, the only Trypillian site where human remains dating to the first half of the 4th millennium BC have been consistently found is Vertiba Cave in West Ukraine, suggesting their gentle treatment of the dead, their complete integration with the natural world. The whispers grow stronger as each new discovery adds to the picture of this remarkable civilization. Advanced pottery techniques, including some of the world's earliest pottery wheels, urban planning that rival modern cities in their sophistication, agricultural innovations that supported populations larger than some medieval European cities, and through it all, an absence of violence, a commitment to beauty, a spiritual life centered on the divine feminine and the cycles of nature. In the quiet spaces between excavations, when the archaeologists have gone home and the sites rest under starlight, you can almost hear the ancient voices more clearly. The laughter of children playing in courtyards that have been mapped down to the last storage pit. The conversations of families sharing meals in houses whose floor plans have been carefully recorded. The songs of celebration that once echoed through settlements whose boundaries have been precisely measured and documented. Modern technology has allowed us to hear these whispers more clearly than ever before. The Trypillia megasites of Ukraine are now known to be the largest settlements in 4th millennium BC, Europe, and possibly the world, with the largest reaching 320 hectares. Satellite imagery reveals patterns invisible to the naked eye, showing how these great settlements were integrated into the landscape with a sensitivity that modern urban planners are only beginning to appreciate. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery is not what the earth has yielded, but what it has withheld. Despite over a century of intensive excavation, despite the discovery of thousands of sites and countless artifacts, the Trypillians remain mysterious, peaceful, impossibly gentle in a world that has known so much violence. Their secrets are not hidden in fortress walls or weapon caches, but in the spirals painted on pottery, in the placement of goddess figurines, in the careful orientation of their circular settlements toward the movements of celestial bodies. Each new generation of archaeologists brings fresh eyes and new technologies to bear on these ancient mysteries. DNA analysis of the few human remains found suggests connections between the Trypillians and other peaceful cultures across Europe. Chemical analysis of their pottery reveals trade networks that stretched across continents. Carbon dating pushes back the timeline of their achievements, showing that they were creating urban centers and sophisticated art, while most of Europe was still living in scattered hunter-gatherer bands. The whispers have grown loud enough now that museums around the world showcase Trypillian artifacts, sharing their beauty and their mystery with visitors, who often leave feeling profoundly moved by contact with this ancient gentleness. Exhibitions based on artifacts first discovered by Vikenty Kavoika include tools, items of adornment, ceramic figures, earthenware portraits, and pottery, with Trypillian pottery noted for its sophisticated decorative schemes, attractive forms, and fine execution. But the most important rediscovery may be happening not in museums or universities, but in the hearts and minds of people who encounter the Trypillian story and find themselves asking profound questions about how human beings might choose to live in a world often dominated by competition and conflict. The whispers from beneath our feet speak of another possibility, another way of being human that our ancestors achieved for thousands of years. The earth continues to yield its secrets slowly, patiently, in its own time. New sites are discovered regularly, each adding nuance to our understanding of this remarkable culture. Advanced techniques allow archaeologists to reconstruct not just what the Trypillians built, but how they lived, what they ate, how they organized their communities, what they believed about the sacred nature of existence. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between discoveries, when researchers pause in their careful work and listen to the wind moving through the grass above those ancient settlements, they report hearing something that cannot be measured or catalogued or displayed in museums. They hear the whispers themselves, the gentle voices of a people who achieved something we are still trying to understand, who created beauty without violence, who built great communities without exploitation, who lived in harmony with the earth for longer than any civilization since. These whispers speak not just of the past, but of possibilities for the future. They remind us that the human story includes chapters of peace as well as war, of cooperation as well as competition, of reverence for the feminine divine as well as worship of masculine power. They suggest that the qualities we most admire in the Trypillians are not lost to us, but sleeping in our own hearts, waiting to be awakened by the right touch, the right understanding, the right commitment to living gently upon the earth. As you feel yourself settling deeper into this archaeological dream, surrounded by the patient whispers of the past, you begin to understand that discovery works in both directions. We uncover the Trypillians as they uncover us, revealing aspects of our own humanity that we had forgotten were possible. In learning to hear their whispers, we learn to hear our own deepest wisdom. In touching their artifacts, we remember the joy of creation. In understanding their peaceful way of life, we glimpse what we might yet become. And now, as the modern world grows quiet around you, as the sounds of excavation and analysis fade into the gentle darkness of sleep, the whispers beneath your feet grow clearer still. They call you deeper, past the realm of scientific discovery into the timeless space where all consciousness meets, where the dreams of the living mingle with the memories of those who have returned to the earth, where you can walk once more in the footsteps of the gentle Trypillians and know, for a moment, what it felt like to live in their world of peace and beauty. And now, dear traveler, as the whispers of discovery fade into the deeper silence of night, as the voices of archaeologists and the careful scraping of trowels dissolve into the eternal stillness of sleep, you find yourself walking once more through those ancient fields. But this time, you are not observing from a distance across the centuries. This time, you are home. The moon has risen full and silver above the Ukrainian plains, casting her gentle light across a landscape that seems to shimmer between what was and what is. The grass beneath your bare feet is soft and warm, still holding the heat of the day's sun. And with each step you feel yourself moving not just through space, but through time itself, until the boundary between now and then becomes as insubstantial as moonbeams on water before you. Emerging from the silver mist, like a vision made manifest, stands a Trypillian settlement in all its ancient glory. The houses arrange themselves in perfect spirals, their round walls glowing with warm earthen light, their thatched roofs dark against the star-filled sky. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires that burned out 5,000 years ago, yet burns still in the timeless realm of dreams. The air carries the scent of bread baking, of herbs growing in careful gardens, of the clean earth smell that speaks of home. You walk slowly toward the nearest dwelling, and as you approach, you see that its walls are painted with those familiar spirals, those waves and circles that archaeologists have puzzled over for more than a century. But here, in this dreaming space, their meaning becomes clear without words. They are maps of the soul's journey, guides for consciousness as it moves through the great cycles of existence. They are the visual language of a people who understood that all life moves in spirals, not straight lines, ever returning to familiar places but at new levels of understanding. The doorway of the house stands open, inviting, and beyond it you can see the warm glow of a hearth fire. There is no door to bar your entry, for, in the world of the Trypillians, all souls are welcome, all travelers find rest. You step across the threshold and find yourself in a space that feels both foreign and utterly familiar, as if you have returned to a home you never knew you had been seeking. The interior is simple but beautiful, furnished with the gentle wisdom of people who understood that abundance comes not from accumulating possessions, but from creating harmony. Clay vessels sit in niches carved into the walls, their painted surfaces catching and reflecting the firelight in patterns that seem to dance and breathe. A grinding stone rests beside bags of grain, ready for tomorrow's bread. Woven mats cover the floor there, patterns echoing the spirals on the walls, creating a sense of unity that extends from the smallest detail to the grandest design. But it is not the objects that make this space sacred. It is the presence that fills it, the accumulated love of generations who lived here in peace and contentment. You can feel them around you, not as ghosts or spirits, but as the living essence of gentleness itself, welcoming you into their eternal embrace. In the center of the room, near the glowing hearth, you see a sleeping area, prepared as if it has been waiting for you across all the centuries. Soft furs and woven blankets are arranged on a low platform, and beside it sits a small clay figurine of the goddess, her arms raised in blessing, her face serene with ancient wisdom. Her presence fills the space with a sense of protection and peace that goes deeper than any physical comfort. As you settle onto the soft bedding, feeling the warmth of wool and fur against your skin, you notice that the walls around you seem to breathe with gentle light. The fire in the hearth burns without consuming its fuel, casting shadows that move like living prayers across the curved ceiling. Through the open doorway, you can see other houses in the settlement, each one glowing with the same warm light, each one home to the sleeping souls of this peaceful people. A woman appears in the doorway, though whether she enters from outside or materializes from the light itself, you cannot say. She is both young and ancient, her face smooth as a girl's, but her eyes holding the depth of countless generations. Her hair falls in dark waves around shoulders draped in cloth of deep earth colors, and when she moves, it is with the fluid grace of water flowing over stone. She carries in her hands a bowl of milk, still warm from the cow that gave it, and a piece of bread fresh from ovens whose fires were lit by the sun itself. These she places beside your bed, not as a servant offering sustenance to a guest, but as a mother providing comfort to a beloved child who has traveled far and is finally home. Rest now, she says, though her voice comes not through the air, but directly into your heart, speaking in a language older than words. You have journeyed long to find us, but you were never truly lost. You have always been one of our children, one of the family that extends across all time and all space. Sleep now in the arms of the mother who birthed all things and holds all things in her eternal love. As she speaks, you feel a profound release, as if burdens you didn't even know you were carrying simply dissolve away. The worries of your modern life, the anxieties about past and future, the sense of disconnection from the natural world, all of these fade like morning mist in the warmth of the sun. Here, in this timeless space, you remember what it feels like to be completely at peace, completely at home, completely held by forces greater and gentler than anything you had imagined possible. The woman reaches out and touches your forehead with fingers that are warm and soft as summer rain. At her touch, you feel yourself sinking deeper into the bedding, deeper into relaxation, deeper into the embrace of sleep itself. But this is not ordinary sleep. This is the sacred rest that comes when consciousness returns to its source, when the individual soul recognizes its unity with the great soul that moves through all existence. As you close your eyes, you can hear the gentle sounds of the settlement around you. Somewhere, a child murmurs in sleep, safe in the arms of loving parents. Nearby, an elderly couple speaks in soft voices of the day's simple blessings. From the house across the courtyard comes the sound of gentle snoring, the peaceful breathing of those who sleep without fear, without worry, without the troubled dreams that plague those who have forgotten their connection to the earth and sky. The goddess figurine beside your bed seems to pulse with gentle light, and in that light you see visions of the life you might have lived in this place, in this time. You see yourself working in the fields under the warm sun, your hands learning the ancient rhythms of planting and harvest. You see yourself sitting at the potter's wheel, shaping clay into vessels both beautiful and useful, each one carrying, within its curves, the love of the maker. You see yourself dancing in the moonlight with others of your community, your feet following patterns as old as the spirals painted on your walls. But more than activities, you see yourself living with a different quality of being. Here, you are never hurried, never anxious, never driven by the desperate need to achieve or acquire or compete. Here your days unfold with the natural rhythm of breath, of heartbeat, of the cycles of moon and season. Here, you wake each morning, not to obligations and demands, but to possibilities and gifts. Here, you fall asleep each night, not exhausted by struggle, but fulfilled by the simple joy of being alive. The fire in the hearth burns lower now, its flames settling into glowing embers that cast a warm, steady light. The shadows on the walls grow softer, more like embrace than substance. Through the doorway, you can see that the other houses in the settlement are growing dimmer too, their inhabitants settling into the deep rest that comes when day's work is done and night spreads her dark wings over the world. But even as darkness deepens, you feel no fear, no loneliness. The goddess watches over you with the infinite patience of stone, the infinite compassion of water. The walls around you hold the accumulated peace of generations who slept safely within their curves. The earth beneath the house supports you, with the same gentle strength that once supported all who came before you, and will support all who come after. Your breathing grows slower, deeper, matching the ancient rhythm that moves through all living things. Your heartbeat aligns itself with the great pulse that drives the movement of planets and stars, the circulation of oceans, the turning of seasons. You feel yourself becoming part of something vast and eternal, while never losing your individual essence, your unique place in the great tapestry of existence. The last thing you are aware of, before sleep claims you completely, is the sound of singing. It comes from no particular direction, seeming to arise from the very air around you. From the walls of the house, from the earth itself. It is wordless, music, melody without beginning or end, harmony that encompasses all possible voices. It is the lullaby that the universe sings to all its children, the song that rocks planets in their orbits and guides souls through their dreams. And in that singing, you hear all the voices of the Trypillians, past and present, and future, welcoming you home. You hear the potter humming as she shapes clay, the farmer singing as he walks behind his plow, the mother crooning to her child, the grandmother sharing the ancient songs with young ears. You hear the collective voice of a people who knew how to live gently upon the earth, how to find joy in simple things, how to sleep peacefully under the protection of forces greater than themselves. As consciousness fades and dreams begin, you know with absolute certainty that you are safe, you are loved, you are exactly where you belong. The fields of Trypillia stretch endlessly around you, bathed in eternal moonlight, populated by souls who have found their way to perfect peace. And here you will rest, here you will dream the deep dreams that restore the spirit and heal the heart. Here you will remember what it means to be truly, completely, peacefully human. The spiral patterns on the walls continue their ancient dance in the firelight, carrying you deeper into sleep, deeper into dreams, deeper into the timeless space where all beings who have ever sought peace eventually find their way home. And in the morning, whether you wake in this ancient house or in your modern bed, you will carry with you the memory of this place, the feeling of this belonging, the knowledge that somewhere, always and forever, the fields of Trypillia are waiting to welcome you back. Sleep now, child of the ancient earth. Sleep in the arms of the mother who has tended all her children since time began. Sleep in the peace that passes understanding, in the love that encompasses all existence, in the gentle dreams of those who have learned to live in harmony with the great mystery that moves through all things. The moon sets slowly over the Ukrainian plains, but her light never truly fades. It lives on in the pottery spirals, in the earth that remembers, in the dreams of all who seek a better way to be human. And in those dreams, the whispers of ancient Trypillia continue to speak their gentle wisdom to any heart willing to listen, any soul ready to come home. And so the ancient dreams fade softly into silence, like mist dissolving in the first light of dawn. The circular houses grow translucent, their earthen walls becoming one with the morning air. The goddess figurine returns to clay, the fire to memory, the songs to whispers, carried on winds that blow across time itself. But something remains, something precious and eternal, that cannot dissolve with the ending of dreams. In the quiet chambers of your heart, a small flame continues to burn, with the gentle light of Trypillian wisdom. In the depths of your being, the spirals still turn, carrying within their ancient curves the secret of living peacefully upon the earth. The have returned to the soil from which they came, their great settlements now buried beneath layers of grass and grain. Yet they are not truly gone, for they live on in every act of creation, every choice of gentleness over violence, every moment when human beings remember that we are not masters of the earth, but its beloved children. Their pottery lies broken in museum cases. Their houses exist only as archaeological floor plans, their language is lost to silence, but their greatest gift remains intact, woven into the very fabric of human possibility. They showed us that cities can exist without walls, that communities can thrive without conquest, that civilization can flourish in harmony with the natural world. In your dreams tonight, and in all the nights to come, may you carry with you the peace of those ancient Ukrainian fields. May you remember the warmth of that circular house, the blessing of the goddess figurine, the comfort of belonging to something greater than yourself. May you find, in the spiral patterns of your own life, the same patient wisdom that guided the Trypillians through their long centuries of gentle existence. For though their voices have faded into whispers, though their footsteps have dissolved into dust, the truth they lived remains as bright as moonlight on water, as constant as the turning of seasons, as enduring as the love that moves through all things. Sleep now in the embrace of that eternal love. Rest in the knowledge that somewhere, always, the fields of Trypillia are waiting to welcome you home. And when you wake, may you carry their gentleness into the waking world, their wisdom into your daily choices, their peace into every heart you touch. The ancient ones have spoken their truth across the centuries. Now it is time for their whispers to become silence, their stories to become dreams, their dreams to become the deep, restorative sleep that heals all things and makes all things new. Good night, dear traveler. Sweet dreams from the timeless fields, where the Trypillians still dance in the moonlight, still create beauty with loving hands, still remind us that another way of being human is always possible.